Welcome to Care, where we have candid conversations about giving care and receiving care.
As experts in psychology, mind-body wellness, and caregiver well-being, we created a new genre of support for caregivers. We joined the caregiver team, providing individualized tools and resources to help caregivers transform their experience.
I'm Jackie, a licensed clinical psychologist and certified yoga instructor, passionate about providing holistic solutions to transform people's relationship to stress and overwhelm. I love supporting caregivers in navigating the complexities of their roles and returning to their priorities, especially returning to themselves.
And I'm Marcie, a licensed clinical psychologist and expert in neuropsychology, on a mission to help caregivers notice where they're stuck and work together with them to identify and build strategies to get unstuck. When I was suddenly diagnosed with breast cancer, a whole new perspective was introduced to caregiving care. From caregiver expert to care recipient, I found myself in a unique position to bridge the gap between the experience of providing care and receiving care.
Join us on a journey examining different caregiving topics and experiences in which we draw from both our professional expertise and now very personal experience. Full disclosure, caregiving struggles just got a lot more personal. Okay. Welcome back to Care. Marcie and I are here to continue our conversations. And today we're going to be talking about competing priorities. So I'm going to start by turning it over to Marcie, and you can kick us off on this topic.
Sounds good. Well, good to be back. Obviously, some changes have occurred since we were last together. I am in the middle of chemotherapy, feeling pretty good today, so grateful for that. And yeah, taking it one day at a time. But I am excited to talk about competing priorities because it's something that, in the face of my diagnosis, has been on my mind a lot, and also on the mind of the people in my life who are taking care of me, or helping to take care of me. So hopefully this conversation will be helpful. And yeah, let's dive in. So when I was diagnosed, I felt this immense sense of urgency or pressure of I don't know how much longer I have, right? This shortened time horizon. And every choice I made felt like I was making a choice at the sacrifice of something else that was important to me. And it was really hard for me, and continues to be hard for me, to figure out and balance what my priorities are and how to do things that are in line with those priorities at any given moment of my day or week or month. And so for me, some of the big areas that emerged were my health. As I've said in the past, cancer is like a full-time job and requires a lot of maintenance. It's very high maintenance. Very high maintenance, boss. That balancing that with sort of the health routines that I had previously, I doing yoga, running, walking, things like that. Balancing my career, figuring out what aspects of my job I'm going to be able to continue doing through all of this, financially, what the repercussions of changing my job or letting go some of my positions would look like, things like that. and then engaging with my family, and spending time with my family. And all of those things have been really challenging to sort of in this context of feeling like I don't have time, if that makes sense. Choosing in any given moment, right? Like what is most meaningful to me, which felt so big and overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I have to imagine also, and I remember some of our like early conversations when the diagnosis started and you were starting to feel that way about like the time horizon, feeling, like it's shortened in that sense of urgency, that you also needed some downtime to just be in, like watch TV or zone out or take care of yourself, right? In these other ways where you're not constantly focused on the types of things that you normally would. And that also came for you with this sense of guilt, or like I'm wasting my time if I'm resting, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and I was just talking with my parents about this earlier, that like kind of this general realization for me that we're all dying, which sounds very obvious, also sounds very dark, but is actually the truth. Um, but health kind of gives us the luxury of being able to ignore that or like pretend that it's not happening. And for me, one thing that a diagnosis of cancer has really taken is that luxury to pretend that I'm not dying. Just it's a constant reminder, right? My body is under threat and I'm constantly sort of coming up against that time as finite. And I think that has not only affected me, but has affected the people around me. I know for my husband and my parents, you know, immediately immediately when I was diagnosed, my dad was like, "Well, we'll be spending a lot of time together." And it was almost as if like the end of that not completed sentence was like, because like if you die, like I want, to be creating memories with you now. Um, and I know my husband has struggled a lot with, he's like a very active doer type. And when I've been unable to do things like after surgeries, after chemo, when I need to rest, that's been something that's been really hard for him, this competing priority of wanting to spend time with me and wanting and needing to do other things, right? Take care of our son, or take care of the house, or take care of himself, which is something that usually gets left behind. So yeah, just this idea of like competing priorities and how it's affected me for sure. And also it's affected the people around me. And it's been interesting to kind of talk with them about what it's been like. My husband and I actually had like a good conversation about it yesterday, which I'm happy to share more about. But
I'm curious,
yeah.
like what kinds of things did come up in that?
Yeah, so So I kind of explained to him like how it's been for me, right? This like in the face of a diagnosis, which most, all seems too too definitive. um, most care recipients have, right? Some kind of diagnosis. Um, it's not necessarily terminal diagnoses, which I'm hopeful that mine is not a terminal diagnosis. But whatever season you're in, if it's more chronic maintenance or acute illness, right? Something that you're facing. I think many care recipients probably have this experience of, right? Like there's a whole song dedicated to it, Live Like You Were Dying.
Yeah, right.
But what that actually looks like and how that actually plays out for people, like for me, that's been really anxiety producing in a lot of ways rather than freeing.
Like pressures you. Like it puts pressure on you to do it the right way. Like I better live the right way now.
Right. Like I better do the things that mean a lot to me and spend the time with the people who mean the most to me and have the experiences that when I do die, I want to look back and say, like, I'm so glad I had that experience. Or, do the work that when I look back, I say, like, oh, that's what I wanted to be doing. Like, that was my purpose. That's been anxiety provoking and is something that I'm like actively working with and sort of trying to cultivate less pressure around that and more, present moment awareness kind of thing. And I think that's something that my husband didn't really think about. I think that, and probably my parents didn't necessarily either until until I told them today that life is just the anticipation of death. They're like, oh dear,
they're like, she's doing well today. But also like you are doing really well today.
No, I am doing really well. It was right before I went into Target and bought out the headband section to see if it works better with my wig. I was like, hey, gotta go check out the headband situation in Target.
They're like concerned for you, but when you showed up in our conversation today, I was like, she's doing great.
Yeah, no, today's good. But right, I don't necessarily think it's a conversation that people have. And I think it's an important conversation to have with the people who do matter to you and who are involved in your care and involved in taking care of you. Because I think it shapes behavior in a lot of ways. I know that it shapes my behavior, right? Even in the, like what you were saying, like choosing to watch TV versus read a book or journal or spend time with someone or call up a friend. Like those choices, which in the past didn't produce really any anxiety in me because I felt like, oh, I'll just do the other thing another time, now do. And that obviously has a ripple effect on the people around me. And I think one thing that my husband acknowledged was that, like, he sees me either kind of as having good days or bad days, right? But what he doesn't realize sometimes is that the effort it takes on my good days to come across as I'm having a good day can be a lot. And so that ties into his experience because he has his own priorities, right? Many of them are overlapping with mine, which I think we're really lucky in that sense. But he's his own person and has his own priorities. And when he sees me having a good day, let's say, his hope is that I can kind of contribute a little bit more so that he can do the things like work out or go to the gym or run an errand without our 20-month-old with him, which is not an efficient way to run errands. um, and a few weeks ago, it got to the point where I thought we had had like a pretty decent day. I had been pretty queasy most of the day, but like had tried to, after our son woke up from his, I like slept in. And then after our son woke up from his nap, I like tried to make sure that I was with them the rest of the day. And afterwards, like at dinner, my husband was like, well, I really wanted to go for a bike ride today, but like you didn't say, like, is there anything that you need? And it ended up being a productive conversation. There were tears involved because I felt like I was being attacked in a way, and he felt like he wasn't being seen, and so like it wasn't all roses and butterflies. But what came out of it was an understanding of needing like a check-in.
Yeah. That
And sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said that makes a lot of sense.
And right, every caregiving situation is different, especially if you're dealing with a care recipient who is cognitively intact versus somebody who's having memory concerns or not. I think that, there's a huge continuum and spectrum. And even if your care recipient isn't the person that's able to necessarily do the check-in with you, I think there's something to be said. At least there has been for him in the past couple of weeks, right? Like, of being intentional about a check-in, like, what do you need today? And that, in our situation, goes hand in hand with, and this is something that we haven't started doing yet, but we talked about last night, is doing a check-in with me on how are you feeling today, but like very specific. And he was like, let's create a scale. He's like a sciencey person. It's like, let's create a scale, which I think is a brilliant idea, and I think we should do this, of sort of like where you are physically, where you are emotionally, where you are fatigue, and like how much you think you can do, so that he has some data and some numbers to work with that go beyond like, your eyes look a little tired.
Right. Like, it takes the guesswork out of it, and having that direct conversation also lets you know, like, should you feel well enough to be, caring for your kid by yourself for a period of time, like that, it would be great to know that he would totally use that hour or whatever for something else. It's like just being really open and honest with yourself, and then like with each other about your needs. And it sounds too like, if something can't be achieved in that day, then it can't be, but at least this way, so that then you could be like, oh, okay, I'm feeling like this right now. If you want to go do that thing that you mentioned, like, please go do that thing, versus everybody guessing, or everybody, I think that comes up with caregiving in general and care recipients, which is like, people kind of get into those roles and sometimes feel stuck, and it's hard to talk about it because it can be really uncomfortable. And then, of course, if you throw in the mix, like you mentioned, cognitive decline or aging adults or conditions that make it actually really hard to communicate, it's that much more confusing, right? About like where to go with this, because you can't always know what each other's needs are. It's not always understood. But in this case, like, it seems like that could be a really helpful takeaway that, we could probably flesh out more and like create a practical tool, just like you're talking about in your household, right? For caregivers that we work with, right? Like, it's kind of like, what are the effective communication skills for this part of things?
Right. And I think it goes back to identifying priorities, because his perspective on that day where we were all together, and in my mind I was like, oh, I'm doing a really good job of like being present with them. And in his mind, he said, he was like, I want to spend time with you. And also, like, it would have been really nice to go out on the bike for an hour. I think that's been something that shows up a lot for him. And he's described it as kind of this like cumulative effect almost, where like suddenly he gets to a breaking point. And we've talked now a couple times of like, okay, well, because his sort of perspective was like, because my reaction to that is like, okay, well, let's sort of do like prophylactic self-care, right? Like, let's put things in place so that you don't get to that breaking point. And he's kind of been resistant to that up until now, because he's like, oh, well, we can't anticipate when the meltdown's going to be or when the breaking point's going to be. He wouldn't, only my instances of emotion are meltdown. Everyone else's are just typical emotion. But, and I know we need to wrap up here in a second, but he's had this resistance to it. And I think finally, over multiple conversations, what we've come to an agreement, and that we're planning to implement, so I'll let you know how it goes, is a strategy of him sort of clearly identifying what are the things that get him to the point of, we're going to call it meltdown, right? What are the things that get him there? And for him, it's like if he hasn't been able to work out in ages, if he hasn't been able to, and this is what he said to me last night, like if he hasn't been able to work out, if he's not feeling like he's able to like take time to learn new things for his job, if he's not able to like have moments by himself, those are some of the big ones. And so scheduling prevention, right? By saying like, okay, this is what the next month looks like. What days can we bring in help? Can we have my mom come in? Can we have a babysitter come in? Can we have my sister come in, so that you can have an hour or 2 or 3 or half a day to recharge? And he was really resistant to that. And I think that can be kind of common, that feeling of like, no, there's no way to like avoid that accumulation. And I think that is actually a really useful strategy.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, you summarized it already. I know we said like at the end of each care to care conversation we have, we kind of want to conclude with, summary points or takeaway for, for this to be helpful for others, hopefully. And I think that's it. Like, I love how you said, schedule prevention, right? Check-ins. And I like that you normalize the resistance to that, because I think we can all get like that from time to time when it's like, here's a potential solution. It's like, no, like everything's terrible. Forget it. Like we can't resolve this. And it's like, even though a lot of the time things do feel terrible right now, right? Like, what are the things that you can plan, that you can exert a little bit of control over, or feel a little empowered and like a sense of agency over both of your lives, right? Care recipient, caregiver, you're also a caregiver, right? Like you are in these multiple roles as a parent too. So I think looking at a schedule, and still it's not like taking it the entire, lifespan at a time. It's like we kind of know what the next month looks like, and we can identify days to get some extra help so that way there's a bit of a buffer, right? Like either way, if you're feeling like you actually can't do one-to-one care with, your child, just you and him, you maybe have somebody else so that your husband can still do that time for himself and vice versa. So I think that's a great takeaway, like scheduling prevention. And I think that's something that we could come back to too.
Awesome. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, we are excited to continue the conversations. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We look forward to more soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.